I was walking on glass, broken glass from the windows, pieces of wood, and I was actually expecting the worst. On the emotional level, to tell you the truth, I was basically numb. I was faced with the fact that this major central piece had fallen face down onto the floor, and knowing that it contained all the glass vessels from our collections, I expected them to have been broken, all of them. I actually received a call from the British Museum asking if they could help and offering some assistance. So that first phone call really gave me some hope that I was not alone and that there are things that could be salvaged or things that could be done. The second layer of the challenge was the fact that although we had maybe the money in the bank, we just couldn't access it in Lebanon. And so I couldn't buy the material, the proper material, to organize a rescue mission for that showcase. Of course, we can't just pick up those broken glass without any material, proper material to handle that. So I started contacting the Institut National du Patrimoine in Paris, and they had an amazing response. 4 days later, the expert from the Institut Claire Criobert reached Lebanon on September 4th. We started working with her closely with the entire museum team and students and volunteers from other universities as well, trying to help her pick up and recover all the shards. We were here full days working on our hands and feet, trying to sift through these thousands and thousands of shards. We had to really look very carefully to finally be able to identify and box somehow the fragments that belong to the same object and identifying them with our original inventory.
The city was clearly in a bad shape. We were in the middle of the pandemic. We only had 4 days to pick up all the fragments from the floor and start thinking about conservation. What was difficult was to pick up everything in a limited amount of time, so over 4 days, while making it possible later on to reconstruct those objects, to separate them out, so making sure that we did not lose information about where the fragments were on the floor, so that would help later on with sorting the fragments and do the puzzle work.
You have to imagine that we were dealing with thousands of shards. The showcase is made out of glass, the shelves were made out of glass, and the vessels themselves, which mostly were tablewares, were made out of glass. So sifting through these thousands of shards took quite a lot of work and commitment and perseverance. But all of that turned out very beneficial, because after that we were able to assess that about 15 pieces were restorable, which gave us a lot of hope and which allowed us to start preparing and at least dreaming of a second mission and a third mission of restoration of our artifacts.
For this ball, we were able to find all the shards, or almost all the shards, and we were very happy to see that it's almost complete. And so we put it together temporarily to make sure that we had all the missing fragments. In order for the fragments to get to the British Museum safely, we need to pack them individually so that they don't suffer additional breakage. And so each fragment is secured in a socket that's tailor-made to fit it exactly. And so each object is totally secured, cannot move during transportation, and won't suffer from possible shocks or vibrations. It can seem counterintuitive to put so much effort into traveling these broken fragments safely. But in fact, each break is a loss for the object and makes it less structurally sound, even after conservation. And so this is why we're really trying to minimize any risk of additional damage during transportation.
The puzzle work was very difficult. You have to get used to the object first, and when you see a piece you can say maybe this is for this object and try to see the color, the shape, and then do the puzzle work, see if this piece goes with this piece. When they went to the airport, I was the one who was with the company who transported the objects, so I knew they were in good hands and they arrived safely at the British Museum.
So this is how the objects arrived from Beirut. The first step will be to unpack these objects and do a condition check, see if nothing has happened during travel, check that the condition hasn't changed since they were packed, and then I'll do a thorough examination and a condition report, and then I can start the puzzle work process.
We are very excited that we have the vessels together and we started actually looking at them. Claire and Aimé have been doing all the related documentation and puzzle work. Aimé is here to help with the glass project, but at the same time, she's here to work with myself and my colleagues in the conservation section. So Aimé will take back all the knowledge and all the information she learns here to the AUB Museum and hopefully assist the team there in Beirut to build their new conservation studio and new conservation team in the near future. And none of this would be possible without the support from the TFAF Museum Restoration Fund, who helped us to bring this project together. So the first thing would be to, like I said, laying all the fragments down. We have eight objects, and they came in different boxes. So taking all the fragments out, object by object, putting all the fragments, laying all the fragments down, and trying to make sure that the joints are correct, all the fragments go well together. And after that, just to make sure that we are not missing any fragments out or anything, we would do a dry reconstruction to see the gaps within the vessel and to see if we have the actual fragments to go into those gaps to fill them. And once we actually complete this process, then we will discuss what kind of treatment, what kind of adhesives we're going to be using for the reconstruction process. And after that's decided, then our conservator will just go ahead with it and start reconstructing, adhering the glass fragments together to complete the individual vessels.
So after the condition examination, the next step is the puzzle work process. So the idea is to find where every piece goes. And so it's like a really big jigsaw puzzle. I'm using the shape of the breakages, the thickness of the fragments, the variations in colors or in surface condition to help me find where the pieces go. For example, this object has some iridescence that you can see in several areas, and this iridescence is actually degradation, glass degradation, but it's not homogeneous across the object, so I'm using the different patterns to help me match the pieces together. For now, it has over 100 fragments that for sure belong to the object, but there are several dozens more that I'm still figuring out. Some definitely belong, but I'm not sure where, and some may not belong. So this is the puzzle work. So once the puzzle work is complete, then the next step is dry reconstruction. So for example, on this bowl, which dates from the 1st century AD, I've already done the puzzle work and I've placed all the fragments where they belong. And the next step will be, as I said, dry reconstruction. So it means temporarily assembling the fragments with a special kind of tape that will not damage the surface. Here is an example of what it looks like after dry taping. The dry taping has allowed me to really visualize the losses. We can see that there are a few losses here. They're not too large, but that helps with also the reconstruction process. It tells me in which order I need to adhere the pieces together. This one was relatively easy because it only has 18 fragments, so finding where they go wasn't too hard, but it also told me that the assembly itself actually won't be that straightforward because some of the breakages are a little chipped or worn, and so that tells me some future difficulties.
When the glass actually shatters, it is not very easy to put back the glass fragments together very kind of neatly. That is another challenge for us, to make sure that all the glass fragments, join really well together, and also whether we will have any big gaps, large gaps between the fragments, and if we have, we need to then decide and come up with some treatment solutions to actually fill those gaps to protect the glass for further, damage.
I feel like it's sort of a background task in my mind. Like I'm constantly thinking about how these fragments fit together. So sometimes I see them at night once I close my eyes.
Once the conservation and reconstruction process, the project is completed, these objects eventually will go back to AUB Museum in Beirut. However, beforehand, there will be a small exhibition from the end of August till October, displaying these 8 beautiful and unique objects and telling their story from Beirut to London.
So the object has been reconstructed for a few weeks already, and it's kind of easy to forget how many fragments there were in it. And looking back at pre-treatment, before treatment pictures, that reminds me like how many fragments there were. It is very obvious on the object that it's been heavily broken, but it still doesn't feel quite as injured as it used to when it was in pieces. We have about, I think, 145 fragments in here. So it was a lot of them, and obviously some of them are very small. And also it's a pretty thin glass piece, so that makes the reconstruction process trickier because it's more difficult to get the alignment of the fragments right. Although I had seen pictures, I had only seen the object in fragments, in pieces, and when I first saw it as a whole object again, it was kind of weird to actually see it. Like it's as if I was like discovering a new object. So there are fragments that I had to readjust, or like for which I found like a slightly different angle as I was doing the reconstruction. And so those I remember very well. They're usually pretty small fragments where the edges are kind of chipped, or they're kind of hard to see what the orientation of the fragment is. I look at it as a whole, but I do remember like certain specific joints and pieces that have given me some trouble. And I'm confident that they're where they should be. I don't have favorites, but I really like the picture because the decoration is very delicate and the shape is very original. And also it has given me a lot of trouble in terms of reconstruction and making the fills in some of the areas. So I've spent a lot of time on it, so it might be one of my favorites. So the whole object is about 90 fragments, but they're mostly all on the top part. And there are losses that really weaken the whole structure. So I had to build the object up in several parts. So I first reconstructed up to the shoulder, and then I reconstructed the neck. But then I had to make fills here and over there to help support the weight of the neck, which is kind of heavy compared to the base. And then once that was done, I could assemble the neck and the lower part. And then from there I could add the top parts, but those also needed fills to hold the fragments together and to support the weight. So I had to make the fills and assemble the last fragments all at the same time. For the amphora, it was a little bit of a similar process. I reconstructed the fragments all the way to the shoulder, and then assembled a couple pieces to the top part, but I had them like in two parts for a while I was making some fills that would help support the weight of the handles, because they're clearly the heaviest part of the object. For the largest bowl, I had to work a little differently from this one, because it is larger and heavier, and also because it has more areas of loss. I had to first reconstruct the center, the base part, and then like groups of fragments. And then before I could assemble those groups of fragments to the base, I had to make several fills, because there were fragments that were sort of floating or that were not attached by a lot. Sort of at the end, it all came together with the full rim coming together. So one object is kind of different from all the other one, and it's this Islamic bottle. It's different in the sense that it's later than the other objects. It's been dated to the 7th to the 9th century, so the beginning of the Islamic period. Scientific analysis has been helpful in both improving the attribution and the provenance of the object. We found that it probably was made in Syria and most likely in Raqqa, thanks to the glass composition. But also we've been researching what the different deposits on the surface were, both on the interior and on the exterior, and that knowledge actually has helped us make decisions, like informed decisions in terms of treatment. So it has helped us decide that we wanted to actually keep that black deposit that we can see on the surface, because it's related to the manufacturing of the object and the decorating technique, which is called silver staining or luster. And actually that black deposit is what's left after firing. That's the organic material that served as a binder when the decoration was applied. It's an achievement to have them as complete as they are, because it wasn't necessarily obvious when we first picked up the pieces on the floor at the museum in Beirut. It's also very encouraging for the rest of the objects back in Beirut that are still broken and in boxes, some of them mixed up, some already sorted out. But it shows that we can recover a lot of the fragments and we can reconstruct them.
We were there from the beginning. We picked them up from the floor and we did the puzzle work on them. And just seeing them back in one piece is great. Yeah, I think this is the beginning, not the end, because it shows that the collaboration went great and we can achieve great things with the international collaboration.
You don't want to forget that there were human lives that were lost on that day, not just broken objects. But as we were picking up those fragments on the floor on the very first day, it was publicized on social media, and immediately there was extremely good feedback from people just following and being so grateful that we were doing our best to recover that heritage that we thought had just been lost.
I hope people will look at these 8 glass objects very carefully and observe their scars and understand that whatever happens in this world, that people go through, or material or objects go through, there is still hope to make them alive again.
Although they had survived for over 2,000 years, although they had survived earthquakes, tsunamis, world wars, they were all gone in a second on August 4, 2020. So today they have a new mission. It's to allow them to tell new stories. And some of the stories they will tell are the stories of the deceased, the orphans, and the displaced, but they also tell the stories of corruption, greed, carelessness. They will also tell stories of people who fight corruption, people who stand tall, who keep working despite of everything, and just keep looking for a better future.